Good afternoon. It's the OK Grognard Show, just doing a little impromptu work on the OSZine. It's a new project that I'm just starting up. It's a digest size, 16-page, old school medieval fantasy games periodical. And I'm just sort of brainstorming some ideas for it, deciding what to do, how to do it, what to be putting into it. So we'll take it a little bit at a time. Just this camera angle here. Yeah, let's put a little more light on it. What's it like outside right now? Well, in beautiful Lake Geneva, we got some rain coming down, just a very light sprinkle. And on top of that, we have some flurries mixed in. Not what you'd expect for early mid-May, but there it is. Got InDesign open up on the board here. I've got the basic outline of the size of it, which is to say we're looking at 16 pages, and all I've really done on it is this front cover, just to get an idea how I want it to look. I think what I'll need to do is put some text boxes in here, in this sort of semi-open space here, with a rundown of what's inside. I've got this stuff up here. Ostensibly it'll probably be $3. I think the first issue I'll probably just give away, just to get the thing rolling. And I like the idea that I was able to find an image that was public domain. Let's see what we got here. Okay, that's what we want to do. This was an English fairy tale image. And as I recall, I'm going to have to look this up to make sure I get it right. I want to say that this was a public domain image. Let's see if I can find it. Gonna have to check my bookmark manager on another page here. Find my art. This is just, what do we have on the JDB? That's right. John D. Batten. That is the name of the artist. We'll bring that up over here too. Bring that up there. There we go. All right, 60 to 32. English fairy tales, Celtic fairy tales, did a bunch of the fairy tales books in the 1890s, which put the images from that into the public domain. He's got a lot of interesting stuff. Do a quick look at some of his work. This one, for instance, here looks like a sort of a demonic goat. John Dixon Batten. One of the things I should do, that stuff at Project Gutenberg, you can look up that stuff and find that it's find a lot more images by him if that's something that interests you. I want to open up not that one, another folder. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. Let's put this into have that credit in there. So we're thinking call that first page, now front page, since we have a cover. Editorial or musing. We'll discuss some of what the zine is meant to accomplish. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages here. This is going to be larger. I think we'll still have just one page for the opening, introduction, editorial. We'll just call it that. A couple pages for some miscellaneous feature. I think we'll double the pages for armor, equipment, weapons, that sort of thing. Get rid of that. Small dungeon in the center. Probably 4 pages, maybe more. A couple of pages with some monsters. Some of the creatures that will include 2 pages, NBC. Okay, so what are we at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We're still going to have the cover and the back cover. In the back cover, I want to include some support for some OSR and Patreons of friends. Part about what I was looking for was using the frame from the front. Call it an old school rundown. I'll put a image for the OK Grognard show on there. I think the Antipodean. Let's see, the OK Grognard Show. The Antipodean D20. We want to give a shout out there to one of our biggest Patreon supporters, Fat Dragon, Tom Tullis. Thanks to Shane Bradley, Sean Conlon, so those are our 4 Patreon supporters currently. Maybe there'll be more before too long. Let's see. And then I want to give a shout out to a couple other folks we're trying to help, including Hobbs. And we'll add in another supporter or two, or old school rundown folks, people that have some projects in the works that we'd like to see supported. In the PDF version, of course, this will have links. People can print this up themselves. It's going to be 16-page digest. Don't plan to go to print. I plan to use this as just a PDF, or to produce this only as a PDF, as with all things Creative Mountain Games, because I like to keep overhead down. I've got a fair deal of money tied up in the programs I use, the Adobe Creative Suite, which I plunk down every month. I don't know, it's like $53, something like that. I drop about 12 each month on Microsoft 365. So there are some overhead costs inherent. Things I've been collecting a long time, of course. Stock art images, maps, all of that stuff. We definitely want to let's spell that right, huh? Nice and logos. I think the Forge Studios definitely get a shout out in there. So we'll fit all of that into this old school rundown, as well as a few other things on top of that. Let's see here. Let's just do in the introduction, what kind of stuff I would like to put in there. Let me just double check. Hey, working on a project on a map. Hey, I've been playing around a bit with that map. This is not going to be something for this particular. This is a separate thing, obviously. This was just sort of a I don't know. What do you want to call it? A schoolyard challenge. Take a quick look at that. I've been I took out the numbering and stuff because I want to change that around a little bit. That orifice is a little more defined, and I messed around with the coloration around the outside and cleaned up some of did some digital cleanup of some of the lines and stuff to just make it pop a little more. I hope that looks okay to you. We'll see what you say in the chat. At this point, I've told you some of my ideas for what I'm working on with this little project. It's just such a bizarre map. Shared World OSR Outdoor Mega Dungeon. Yeah, right. So the idea behind this is that it can be plunked down into any setting, right? And let's see. Here's what some of what I've written so far. Let me just read you a little bit. And I am writing it up as if it's a sort of adventure, right? This adventure is a testament to the power of inspiration a map can bring. When Jonathan L. Bingham showed it to me, I must admit I was both intrigued and vexed as to what I might do with it. But a few days after first seeing it, some rough ideas began to form. What I eventually decided to do was to create an organic environment that would be a maze-like dungeon crawl within a birthing complex for slimes, oozes, puddings, and other viscous beings, but with an overarching evil malevolence behind their production. And I'm going to skip a bit here to talk about it a little more. Here we go. In a cavern below the ground, there is a plain of mud which fills a deeper aquifer. Nestled in this liquefied matter is a creature which shifts about periodically to push its single orifice to the surface, whereby it draws breath and belches forth foul substances of a most grotesque nature. It is not known if this rare being is alien to the planet or simply so primeval that its origins are lost to time immemorial. The organic complex depicted in JLB's map begins in the upper right with the mouth-like orifice and gives way to a series of tubes and chambers. I took the liberty of assuming most of the tubes would allow transit in only one direction due to an abundance of retrorse spines and slippery secretions which coat the entirety of the tubular passageways. The spines are pliant when encountered from one direction, but stiffen when confronted from the other, and from the inflexible direction can cause great damage. The secretions which coat the passageways and chambers of the complex are multi-purposed. They break down organic materials and minerals, albeit slowly, such that leather and skin will degrade within 24 hours, and metals will break down in 72 hours, and all such materials will be absorbed into the structure, biochemically repurposed to generate fuel for the processes which produce the output of the complex. So too these secretions are likewise incombustible and will squelch fire in moments if exposed to the flames of a torch or oil. There's a maze-like quality to much of the complex, in several instances leading back to the entry chamber. 4 dead-end compartments hold spawning points for the complex's grotesque issue. If these production nodules are destroyed, the passageways that lead to them will cease to allow only one-way transit. So, essentially, you enter this way and cannot easily return. The idea being that 1, 2, 3, and 4, these dead-end chambers will have those nodules that in turn respectively produce green slimes, ochre jellies, black puddings, and then probably gelatinous cubes or something like that. And then in this chamber in the upper left, there'll be this sort of floating brain-like consciousness that has tendrils which can reach out and tap into the walls and thereby affect the entire organic structure of the entire complex. Right? So it's kind of a controlling entity for the entire place. These other chambers, you can imagine coming down in here and then shooting to the left, shooting to the right. And I have a sort of a preliminary map. I'll kind of hold this up. I don't know if you can see the arrows on there, which show passageway, directional passageways. So you can only go in certain directions, at least initially, until you've destroyed off nodules. And then eventually, if you can destroy off the brain-like creature, you can return to the original chamber and then get out of the place. And in fact, because of the secretions which are breaking down anything which is inside the complex and comes into contact with the walls, floors, ceilings, tubes, you're on a clock. You know, you've got basically a 24-hour time limit on how long you can survive. After a certain amount of time, once the leather in your boots start to break down and your metallic armor and weapons and whatever are starting to break down, there'll be damage to the actual player characters and also damage to any kind of mundane equipment, but also magic items will eventually need saving throws. So the longer you're in, the more likely that you'll eventually be absorbed by this complex creature to then get destroyed. One of the far bottom chambers. One of the other things I started thinking about was what's called aquification, which is using air to aerate something so much, or liquefaction, so that it becomes fluid. So the idea that this creature can stick its orifice up and bring in air, and then through its pores exude that air such that it can then move its weight around within the mud because of liquefaction of the mud. Down at the bottom, this bottom chamber, I decided was going to be a little something different. The floor, ceiling, and walls of this chamber are marred by sooty residue that tinges the secretions with a grayish hue. Periodically and seemingly randomly, organic nozzles can protrude from any surface to spew flames from 5 to 10 feet in any direction. The bursts cause 2d6 of damage to anything they engulf, with an additional 1d3 of damage for 2 rounds thereafter. Saving throws can be granted for half damage from the initial burst, but subsequent damage is unavoidable by anything initially hit and damaged. Larger, bulky matter which happens to become lodged in the nearby tubes is transported by the undulations of the inherent spines. The flames are produced through the outer walls of the creature complex, which has close proximity to a magma chamber at the lowest portion of the mud-filled aquifer, which ignites naphtha produced by the glands in the flesh of the complex creature. Anything disturbing any surface in the chamber will irritate it, such that 1d4 nozzles will protrude every other round and produce the flames. While the nozzles can be damaged and individually destroyed, it will have no effect nor belay other nozzles from protruding and producing new spouts of flame. The only way to cause the nozzles to cease is by ending contact with the floor, ceiling, and walls of the chamber. So this one chamber becomes the place where most things eventually get pushed down by the undulations of these spikes in the tubes and the undulations of the floors and ceilings and walls of the various chambers to send matter down this way to be burnt to a crisp, destroyed, its ashes then being reconstituted biochemically into the fuel that then creates the various slimes, oozes, and puddings. So that's one of the chambers. I've got the other four. I've got the brain chamber, and now I have to figure out what a few of these others will be. I was thinking that in one area, maybe we can have a roper-like creature, something based off of the roper. In another, maybe something based off of like a shambling mound. I'm trying to think of some other types of creatures that can exist in one form or in a alternate form within the other chambers. So that's the idea for this. I'm just bringing it up since you're here. It's getting some work done. Okay, great stuff. I like the one-way passages. Can't wait to see this. Yep. Love to spring it on my players at some point. Cool. Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty neat. It's already taking shape, and I'll put it together once I have some more of the rooms detailed. I can put it together in a written form that's something that's more structured enough to be able to see what it's doing and to be able to read it. Let's see, it's getting a stripping. Okay. Just checking on the chat there, make sure I'm not missing anybody. What have you been working on maps wise, Mr. Bingham? Anything interesting in the last couple of days or the last week or so? Why don't you type a little something in there, and if you got something you want to plug, I'm happy to make mention of it. Editorial musing. Let's see. Well, it's obviously going to be an intro. Let's call it a mission statement. In a way, that's what this first issue is going to want to have. Miscellaneous feature. It's going to need some the dungeon that's going to be in here. I'm folding in a project I'm working on that some people of my Patreon will have seen. It's originally a map that that Heath sent me as part of an envelope from Australia some years back, which I've cleaned up and started using in combination with a Dyson Logos map. So that's going to be worked into this, I think. That will be a good place for that stuff to live. It'll help fill out 4, 6, maybe 8 pages. I think I have it in here as 4 for now, but how big that winds up being is going to be tumbling down under, ostensibly a adventure based on the maps that were sent. Let's see. Working on my Delve zine. Oh yeah, I saw you make mention of that. Sort of Oriental Adventures type supplement for swords and wizardry with 4 fighting classes. Barbarian, Horse Nomad, Ninja, Kensei, and Samurai. Did it for my son on his 16th birthday. Nice. So he's been gaming with you a bit, or does he have his own separate group that he plays with? What's the word there? Obviously following in your footstep, but does he do it as a separate pursuit, or is it something he does mainly with you and other friends of the family? I imagine, even as I ask that, excuse me, even as I ask that, I realize that under current conditions, face-to-face gaming is not in the cards. Sorry to get a little drink there. He has several groups, 1E, 2E, and 5E, as part of his school's D&D club. Oh, that's fantastic. I imagine they're playing online these days. Are they Fantasy Grounds people, Roll20? Do they do Theater of the Mind stuff and just use voice chats, or Google Hangouts with a whiteboard, Discord, voice and video? What's the medium by which they manage to game these days? There's so many options. Whereas I'm using Roll20 mainly myself these days, although I play in a Roll20, or rather Roll20 / Google Hangouts combination with Thaddeus Moore. At least I've played a couple of times. It's the schedule permitting situation where that's changing around. Theater of the Mind on Discord mainly, for your son and his club. So does they switch up these 3 editions with 3 different DMs between them, or is this are there 3 different groups that play each to their own edition, vehemently decrying the others as if edition wars can't happen now that we're online mainly, right? I suppose that's a potential affliction for any group that does any RPGing, is to have favorite systems and favorite editions of favorite systems and so on and so forth. I'm pretty open, although I run primarily first edition games. There's the Thaddeus Moore game is Basic Expert, almost with OSE, Old School Essentials backing to it nowadays, but there are a few house rules I'm discovering along the way. For instance, I know that they've incorporated from 3rd edition. They've incorporated cleave into the mix. And Jonathan saying IDM for 13 teens in Osric 1E and Swords and Wizardry. We have a 2E group that meets sporadically. They play Sword and Wizardry and 5E in school. That's a great mix, huh? They're learning the older editions even as they're learning the newer editions too, and I'm sure they're enjoying each for its inherent idiosyncrasies and eccentricities. Going to introduce them to Hyperborea. Absolutely. You got to do that. What a fun. Are they readers? I should ask. Maybe are they fans of fantasy fiction? Do they read? Have they been introduced to the delights, which is Conan and Conan the Barbarian and other Kane and Other old school sword and sorcery type 3 hearts and 3 lions. Have they discovered those as yeah, they love the game. Yep, it is great. It's been fun. A lot of their parents played and are now getting back into RPGs because their kids are. Yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah, there's a lot of for a lot of my friends that have had kids um, that played back in the day, and then real life demands of job and home and family sometimes would take some of those gamers away from the fold for a period of time. And hey, just shouting at you, rock, Bill. Hey, Bill, how's it going? Is that Bill Allen? Which Bill are we talking there? Manage and stuff at the moment. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, manga and stuff at the moment. Gotcha. Okay, Jonathan. That's all right. There's a lot of fertile ground there in manga and anime for gaming fodder, as it were. Things that can inspire you. Oh, Bill Petrosky. Hey, all right. Good to see you, buddy. Minor Realm Games. Okay. Yeah, right on. Yeah, at a glance, of course, with my eyesight being what it was, I first read that as mirror something games. I wasn't looking closely enough. Minor Realm Games. Very nice. Yeah, those of you who are now beginning to enjoy the delights of virtual conventions, do yourself a favor, and anytime you see a Bill Petrosky seminar on any type of DMing seminar or running games or just playing in games, well worth it, well worth enjoying those. It's highly polished, excellent excellent information, packed full of excellent information, I should say, with a nice chunk of Q&A at the end to help clarify anything that you might wonder more about. So, great times. I don't know if both of you guys have followed the channel yet, but you should pop up to the top there and click and make it, give it a follow, because we also do some giveaways. And because we're in week 7, anybody who follows the channel and pops into the chat stream while they're here and are a follower will be put on a list for a freebie. Do it anyway. You'll like this. Oh, too kind. I see. You're a follower. Thank you. Oh, you mean about the seminars? Oh, they're just great, man. You should be hired by hey Bifford. You should be hired, Bill, by any corporation that's looking to teach people about whether it's leadership or just teamwork, cooperation. I'm sure, you know, learning those things through gaming, I'm sure you could be very helpful doing that sort of thing. Maybe there's a new Zoom company to be formed whereby you do corporate seminars to people while they're isolated at home before we get everything back to some semblance of normalcy. Thank you, Bifford, for popping in. As I was saying, if you follow the channel and you speak up during the chat, you get automatically put onto a list that I keep for a weekly giveaway. Let me just find that drawing page. There it is there. We've given away a bunch of sets of dice over the last 6 weeks. I'm afraid those are gone now. However, we do have this week, thanks to Thaddeus Moore, a set of his wonderful patches which there are 3 of them. I have a couple of them myself, which I'll hold up here. The Old School Man in the Moon patch and the famous OSR Blue Dungeon patch are just 2 of them. And there's a 3rd one with a sort of a Conan-esque sword with OSR also. Those are all in the offing for the Week 7 giveaway, which will be announced a week from tomorrow, on Monday when we do the weekly gaming news and informational broadcast, Monday 9:30 a.m. We also do the giveaway. So tomorrow we'll be announcing who won from last week. Anybody who popped into the chat would be eligible. I need to contact a few people, find out who we got that won. So we'll get there. But I've automatically added you folks in the current chat into the Week 7 giveaway, which will be announced a week from tomorrow. No purchase necessary, as they say. Getting back to some of this OSZine, this old school zine stuff. I don't know. I'm gonna have to brainstorm. It's digest sized, so I'm figuring each page can have a couple of entries on it, 2, 3, 4, maybe more, in a 2-page spread for a feature on weapons or armor or equipment. I'm thinking these are going to be magical weapons, armor, or equipment, or objects. Could be staffs, wands, magic items, any type. So I'll have to brainstorm some of those, tunneling down under. A couple of pages of monsters. These will be ones that I think part of the idea of this, and see if this makes sense, is that there'll be this center spread of a 4 to 6 page dungeon, right? Maps right in the center, so you can fold it open, set it down, print them out on one page. Each map will also have a little key at the bottom with short form details of what's in the various rooms and places. And then the rest of the spread will include descriptions going through it. What I'd like to do is, in these other sections, the arms, equipment, magic items, the monsters, the NPCs that I have in other sections of the zine, will include more detailed accountings of things that are actually in the adventure. So when you're reading through the adventure, it can just mention what is there and give the hard details you need in the moment, hit points and armor class and details on some abilities that will need to be kept in mind while running the adventure. But the long form of the various things, whether they're the magic items, NPCs, or the monsters, will have a separate write-up within the zine. So the idea is that the entire zine will come together as servicing the adventure that's in the center of it, and the other sections of the zine will be the breakdown or more detailed descriptions and information on the various parts that will be part of the adventure as a whole. There'll be a feature toward the front, a couple of pages, so it may be separate, maybe not thematically fitting into the rest of it, but on the other hand, maybe the whole thing should just theme all the way through it. That might be the most interesting way to deal with it. Now I'm wondering too, And again, this is all early stages. Let's see. Do a quick read through of the chat here. Those are nice patches, yeah, Jonathan, for sure. Group of kids I DM for, we gave them all hoodies and with matching back patches and sewed the OSR patches on them. When new kids join the group, we give them a hoodie after their third gaming session. Nice. They're sought after. You need to get more patches. Well, you may win the ones from this week. But Bifford says, I'm trying to put together an advanced fighting fantasy fanzine. Not an easy job. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, anytime you try to organize, um, even something like that where the source material is so rich and so detailed and there's so much of it, um, it's that embarrassment of riches situation, right? Where if I'm making something completely from scratch and putting it together, well, sky's the limit. I can do whatever I want and go in any direction I want. When I'm when I'm writing something that services some other canonical material, then the structure of it has to make sense, but it also has to uh, be in line with what's already published. You can't just say, well, this is about fighting fantasy, but here's how I do it. Well, okay, I get that. Maybe you have some ideas of how you might make some changes to it or whatever. But most people that look for a fighting fantasy fanzine would expect it to be about fighting fantasy, not what your version of it might be, right? People have thrown stuff at me. I need to get it laid out before putting the content in. I don't want to just do a Word document. Yeah, I hear you. Oh yeah, the style of the thing. Yeah, yeah, it's tough, and it's tricky too with fanzines because you have to be real careful about what you're putting into it, especially when it comes to artwork and the mentioning of other copywritten material or other trademarks. Obviously, as you can see from this, inside the back cover, there'll be one page dedicated to the Open Game License, which, as of this next coming December, all I've been using for 20 years for Creative Mountain Games. It's going to be our 2-decade anniversary at the end of this year. Not a huge company, never has been. Always been an e-publishing company, just sort of a hobby company on the side that I use to throw some ideas out there from time to time during third edition and beyond, all through OSR stuff. There's been a lot of stuff that's been generic, like the 30 Things Can Happen, which you could use in any kind of medieval fantasy setting. But it's never been something I've plugged away at full time. Obviously, in the early days, you could make a fair amount of money during the 3.xe era, the early 2000s. But as 2008 came around and 4th edition came on the scene, a lot of that died off unless you wanted to produce stuff specifically for Pathfinder or the dying 3.x market. Yeah, I shouldn't say dying. It never really has gone away, but it's definitely squelched a great deal. And then even with 5th edition coming back around, the revamping of it with the DM's Guild and the ability to use certain proprietary information as long as you're using the DM's Guild licensing rather than just a flat-out OGL makes it a very different animal too. I was talking to somebody the other day about something they were putting together that was possible to put out as an OGL product, but they used a couple of trademarked names that are available through the DM's Guild. So without stripping that stuff out, you're stuck just using it that way. And then also, there's the benefit. I don't want to downplay that because it's big. You put out something through the DMs Guild that's geared toward 5th edition, you've got a built-in audience that's looking at all your stuff and a lot more chance to get in front of eyes of people. And if you produce good stuff, people will eventually buy it. Word of mouth will get around, and as you put out more stuff, it will sell to those same people, that audience. There's always a great number of people that will just download free stuff regardless of whether they'll ever use it or have any real interest in it. I know that the cooperative dungeon projects, the 4 of them that we put out in the early 2000s for 3rd edition and 3.5 eventually, Renee Malgarain and myself worked on that for 4 or 5 years, along with dozens of individuals who we'd put together basically a 14-room location, dungeons, and then parcel out the rooms to individual writers, and then we would collate all of that into one. They all knew the theme, they all knew the basic idea of it, and we would come up with a overarching big boss idea that they would all have to keep in mind as they were creating their individual locations. And all of that was always put out for free, and that has easily, over the years, been downloaded, the individual ones, and then eventually I put them all into one single download. Maybe about 10 years ago I did that, rather than have them all being downloaded individually. And I think there's a 3rd, a 5th, a 7th, and an 11th level adventure. Again, all free, but well over 100,000 downloads over the 15, 18 years those have kind of existed. And that's all well and good, but that doesn't mean that any of those 100,000 people would actually buy something, no matter how much you put it up for. I think a lot of people that put together small projects and then get them up online, and they've toiled away and put their blood, sweat, and tears into something, and then put it up and use that pay what you want approach to, well, I think most people will throw $1, they'll think, or $2, or will suggest it's worth $3, but they can download it, and if they like it, they can come back and download it again and put it up for $3. That does not happen. The rarity of someone paying for something that they can get for free is, well, it almost never happens. If you get something for free, if you put up something that's pay what you want, you're pretty much signaling that you're not expecting any money for it. Now, you may be able to do that, like, for instance, this first issue of this OSZine will be put up for free, but with a $3 price tag, and then just marked down to nothing initially. And other ones will be out for $3 down the line. And, that's a sort of getting the word out sort of idea, marketing idea that, we'll see if it takes. It's not really important. It's not meant to be a big seller. It's more of a project to work on for fun, for the love of it, to get some ideas that I've got piled up, put them all into some sort of format that's worthwhile to some other people to use. So we'll see how it goes. But also, too, Jonathan, we should talk a bit about later about that project, the schoolyard challenge thing that we're working on. We'll talk sometime off air about some ideas I've had for that. Bifford says, I specifically paid 50 pence for 4 items recently. They had a suggested 68p but it was a basic 2-page character sheet. So yeah, see, different people have different ideas about what something's worth. And if you have the option of paying less or paying nothing, most of the time people are going to take it that way. Um, I will say that I didn't download them for free and then go back and pay, but I went to Crooked Staff Publishing. Does some fantastic treatments for um, 2.5D dungeon tile stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with Crooked Staff, but Christian, who's always has had this imprint for forever, huh? Crooked Staff Productions is the name. And I'm going to bring this up over here. Let's see here. This may look familiar to some people, but you can see all of his stuff is pay what you want. But, you know, as he'll tell you, he's been at it forever. You can see so much stuff that he has. The original print and paste dungeons is one of his main things, as you can see from the images. And he puts out videos with a lot of this stuff so you can know how to use it. For instance, let's see here. See if he added the video in here. Yeah, here we go. We'll just do a quick view of that there. Now, because of copyright things, I'm going to have to mute this. But we can zip through 2.5Z, Crooked Terrain, there you go. And you can see it's all stuff that you print out and then paste down on top of corrugated cardboard strips. He shows exactly how to do it. Some of it is little scatter terrain like tables and chairs and barrels and crates and rocks and whatever else that you can build in. And then he takes the time to show people how to cut stuff out. Got a lot of lag on YouTube right now, so 50p each. Yeah, there you go for those character sheets. Well, it's nice of you to do that. And like I said, when I go on this site for picking up stuff from CSP, I always go with the intention of just paying for stuff right out of the gate. Putting together wooden doors. Shows you how to cut the cardboard, how to paste it all together. It's all modular. You know, just an alternative to more expensive dungeon tiles if you don't mind doing a little craft work yourself with some glue sticks and scissors and corrugated cardboard you might have laying around, boxes, whatever. Right? You've got all these different options as far as different terrain types and different pieces you can build together. But he's always done this fantastic job. You've got all sorts of different textures, cave tiles there, interiors, cavern features, specific rooms, decorative floors you can put together. Most of it is meant to be take these textures and build whatever it is you're already interested in building. Here's some cool alcoves with statues that you just print out, paste them on there, put them up. Sewer tiles. So you make your own. You make it your own. That's the idea. Sewer accessories, right? Entryways, gratings. Let's have a quick look at that. Right? Pretty neat. Boarded over entrances, right? Gratings that drop down into sewers. There you go. Culverts. Right? Is that what we call those? And then you build whatever it is you need for the dungeons you've already created on your own, which is nifty. Crooked Staff Productions does a good job. Let's see, where are we at here? Monsters. So this, I wonder if I can find something to bring up. There's that. Okay. Got that. Okay. Just going to dig through a couple of my files here. Oops, let's keep that up there. Now, even though I like this image for the front cover, because I've always had this affinity for griffins, I realize it might not work with the particular dungeon that I'm working on. I want to show you some of what I did with this. I've shown this on one other video, but we'll just do a sort of a recap here. So Heath sent me something back in 2015 before he came up for GaryCon, and he sent it airmail, and he sent it in an envelope on which he drew a map, put my address in on it here in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, put a stamp on it, and away it went. There was return addresses over there. I took that same map, cleaned it up, added a grid to it, and then put a couple of exits on the south end so that it would... Were there exits there? Yeah, there were. Well, I adjusted the exits there so that it would link up with a Dyson Logos map, these two entrances to the rest of the map, so that I could use it together as part of a larger complex. So essentially what we've got is this map and this map as two parts of what I'm calling tunneling down under. Now those will be the center map pages. Let's see, I can always adjust them later, so I'm just gonna go here. What do we got? Pages 8 and 9, right? Let's see. I think we can just drag and drop that in there, right? We'll do that. And shift and bring it on over. Close enough for now. Do a little fitting. Where'd we go? There it is. There we go. We'll add this one in too. And this one's a much bigger map. Then we'll have to work it in even more. Good enough for now. Just placeholders after a fashion. Right? So the center page spread will have this, and I'll have information down here that keys in on the maps. Now this wasn't the original map. This is a very modified version of a Dyson Logos map, which is one of the beauties of how his system works, or how his commercial licensing works. It allows you to adapt, modify, change, and I often make some changes to it because never let it be said that we made it too easy on the player who might sneak out and try to find the maps and take advantage of them. You know what? It might be easier to conceptualize this for a DM if we put the one on the left on the upper page and put the one on the right on the lower page. Is that a good idea? What do you think of that? Rotate 90-degree left. No, I want the exits from this map to drop down this way. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And then you can just have one enter into the other one. Might not be wrong. Let's have a look. Let's see here. Moving on up. Oop. 90 degrees, there we go. Alright. I guess if we do this as you suggest, Bifford, then these will match up pretty well. In fact, we could just bring this down a little bit. In fact, if we bring it down quite a bit, we can get them so they seriously match up. And then we could put headers up here to fill in this space a little bit and make it look a little better. I think this map, we'll change that compass rose. We'll see. We'll make some adjustments to it at some point. Problem is, a lot of this map will have to be adjusted because of the swamp grass that's out here, which would just require going in and changing those so that they're pointed upward. But other than that, yeah, that'll look pretty good. Good call on that. I think that works out really well. Thanks. Funny, but the left map doesn't look right at that angle. Yeah, it's a swamp grass. Once that gets changed, maybe we'll consider changing that compass rose, although that's what he drew on the envelope. The whole thing could be nailed in at there we go. Could be made more black and white, right? So we can fix that too at some point. What does that do? There we go. We will see. Yeah, they fit pretty well like this. We may be able to just bring it all the way up. If this is up that high, will it work? Oh, I see what we did there. Let's undo that. Oof. There we go. That's what we wanted to do. I think we wanted to do that too, right? Does that sync up? Yeah, that looks pretty good. So once we make some adjustments to some of the elements on this map, which is easy enough to do, then it'll link up and it'll look correct. And again, I'm thinking hit this with the old grayscale, make it sharper, make it black and white, rather than having this sort of tinge to it. Originally, the idea for me was to maybe give this out also as a player handout, right? With the idea that some of the complex is known. What's beyond here wasn't known to the people that went here. So my thinking was, there's a group of dwarves that have come to this old mine in search of gems, and they've gotten themselves into some trouble. There are creatures that inhabit this ancient mine that they did not expect to run across. There's a secret door there, and now they're holed up in here. There are some arrow slits here. They've managed to take not a familiar, but a trained pet animal companion, a ferret, whatever, and attach a note to him and sent him back to town, begging for someone to come help extricate them from their little hiding spot in this secret room off of the side here. Um, there are other creatures that are in here that are holding them at bay. And of course, beyond that, there's this whole complex. We've got some interesting pillars here. We've got a room that's collapsed here, a pseudo-processional room here, potentially some sort of a shrine down here, a pool, a couple of pools actually, one much lower than the other, or rather further down. This is a ramp, as you can see by the graduating lines of this. Leads you down here. This leads you down. So all of this part of the complex is below. This is a ramp, and this is a staircase. So all of this section of the complex is kind of a second level. So you've got a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3, at least as far as elevations are concerned. And yeah, had to take the address out. Once that's gone, the orientation of the map works a lot better, right? So there we go. All right. Got to do a quick check here. Just got to check some messages here real quick. Make sure I'm not neglecting anything I should be doing. Not that not that there's anything in this day and age I necessarily should be doing. As probably many people know, I've been a manager of Lake Geneva Games here in the birthplace of D&D for the last 4 years, and at first the limited number of people you could have in a meeting area was starting to hurt the store, and then of course the stay-at-home order pushed us to the point where they simply had to close down. Couldn't have kept it open anyway because of not essential service. So just prior to GaryCon, we shut the doors with the intention of that being temporarily, and currently that is the thinking. But the stay-at-home orders were extended through, in Wisconsin, through May 24th, I think, or is it 26th? I forget now. It's been so long since I looked at some of that information. I think it's the 24th, because that would end it on a Sunday, which means if the hopeful thinking was that at the end of it people could start getting back to work, then Monday morning would be the day on the 25th, right? So we're not sure at this point. It's 2 weeks out before that ends, and we're not sure now if they're going to end the stay-at-home orders at that point, or if they're going to extend them. And even if they end them, in all likelihood, they will reinstitute or continue the limited number of people you can have in a given space at any given time, and the idea that you're supposed to continue to practice social distancing. And for a game store, which has a main value add, if you will, of having game space and being able to run events, tournaments, a lot of Magic events, obviously, but wargaming events, having D&D games going on, board gaming nights, all of those things make the entire business model of a brick and mortar game store possible. And if you can't have more than a few people in a game space at any given time, well, it's tough to expect you're able to meet your overhead. It's tough enough just to pay the rent, pay the bills, but that can be doable, even on a low income. But once you add in employees and all of that, it gets pretty expensive to keep a game store open in this day and age at the best of times. So right now what we're looking at is even once the stay-at-home order is rescinded or lifted and businesses can begin to start opening their doors again, it may be that Lake Geneva Games will just remain closed a bit longer, because until we can have people in the space playing games, we're more than doubling our overhead in times when it's tough enough just to pay the bills to maintain the space. So part of what's been going on thus far is the idea that we could keep the store closed for an extended period of time, looking at it as little more than a secure storage locker, if you will, paying the rent, paying the bills such as they are. Electricity obviously is very low, but you still got to pay for the phone, internet, all of that other stuff, even if you're not using it. So there are those overhead costs, but not purchasing new product currently, because if you're not open to sell it, what's the point of that? And not having to pay employees, all of that keeps your costs down from month to month. And if you can weather 2 now, 3 maybe, 4 maybe, 5, 6 months, a year, what? Until you can start using the space the way it's intended again. If you can weather that and reopen on the other side and reopen fully functional and strong, then ideally that's where you are. It may take half a year or a year to make up for the losses, but the store's been open 9.5 years and is quite solvent and has always been a strong store. So at this point there's no discussion about closing it permanently. It's just a matter of how soon can it open, and open the way that we'd like to reopen it. So it's up in the air, but that leaves me with a fair amount of time on my hands to do some of these other things, and do them I will. For 4 years while I've been managing the store, Creative Mountain Games stuff has really taken a back seat. There's only so many hours in a day and only so much creative energy that is available to put into projects like this. And what energy and whatnot that I had was mainly funneled into the gaming that I did in my free time, whether it was continuing to work on my own setting of Grimwald, which has been around since '74 when I started playing, or just the individual adventures I would put together, or learning how to play a game, rules for this new game that's coming out or that new game that's coming out, or keeping up with the Magic sets and all that stuff, since I do play that too. All of that takes up a lot of extra time and energy, and it's hard to maintain a hobby business of an e-publisher when you've got so much of your creative energy filtered toward those other pursuits. So that was a long way of saying, now that I have some time and I'm doing some of this stuff, it's been very very much a recollection of how much of a labor of love this all is and how much fun it is. And Bifford, I appreciate the suggestion of just rotating these maps. And the more I see it now, the more I like it. Like I say, I'll have to change some of the elements in the map on the left, but I think it works a lot better, and it certainly is going to flow a lot better for people that are running this adventure. This is good centerfold pages too. I think that'll work fantastic with reminders of specifics and detailed keys, so you could run most of it off of here if you've already read the rest of the adventure. The previous couple of pages will include more details about the adventure itself, as will the pages that come after the maps. And of course, as I say, all of the other pages in the opening spreads and the closing spreads, which are monsters, NPCs, magic items, and all of that, will be larger explanations of the individual elements that will then be incorporated into the adventure as a whole. So, good times. Anyway, this has been fun, kind of brainstorming session. I appreciate people popping in and taking part in it, and I appreciate the help, Bifford, with the idea. I'll Bifford, give me your... I don't always make the connection between individuals and their screen names. Now, if you would prefer to whisper it, that would be fine. Or if you want to forego. Thanks, Jonathan. Glad you had a good time. Bifford, if you want to, it's Sam, right? I want to say. Because, I mean, you might not think it's a huge idea, but I'd love to mention you up front. And I can mention you as Bifford, or I can mention you by name too. So, yeah, we'll talk about that. It's not going to happen overnight anyway, so we've got a little time. Once again, I want to thank everybody. This will eventually go up on YouTube also, so people see it over there and watch it. This is all good. Bifford's fine. All right, excellent. Everyone will know you that way anyway, from online anyway, huh? If you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. Like or dislike, thumbs up or thumbs down on the video if you want. Thanks if you're in Twitch or you get in Twitch later. Make sure to follow and speak up in the chat during a stream to be eligible for the weekly giveaways. And I guess that's all to say. Thanks from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We'll catch you next time on the OK Grognard Show.